I swear I saw that same scruffy dog on my front step again last night. And this time, I thought he might not make it till morning. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. The kind of thing you say when your heart races faster than your thoughts, when fear for a stranger's soul overrides everything else. My name is Laura Hayes, and I live on a quiet street in a small town in the Midwest. My house is old, the kind with creaking floorboards and a porch that groans under your weight like it's sighing from years of stories it's witnessed. For weeks, every evening when I pulled into the driveway after work, I'd find him there, curled up tight in the corner, ribs showing through this thin coat, fur matted in patches like no brush had touched it in months. At first, I told myself he belonged to someone. Maybe he wandered off. Maybe his family was out there, searching. But night after night, he returned. And every morning, before dawn, he vanished. Like he knew he wasn't supposed to stay too long. Like he was afraid of becoming a burden. Then came the night everything changed. I got home late. The sky hung low and heavy with storm clouds, and my headlights cut through the darkness to reveal him. Smaller than I remembered, trembling so slightly, it was almost invisible. He lifted his head slowly, and our eyes met. Big, tired, brown eyes that carried the weight of a life no dog should have known. I stepped out of the car, heart pounding. I walked slowly toward the porch, whispering, "Hey there, buddy. You okay?" He didn't growl. He didn't run. He just stared, then laid his head back down, as if even lifting it had taken the last of his strength. My neighbor's porch light flickered on across the street. Mrs. Turner peeped through her curtains, probably wondering why I was standing in the cold, talking to a stray. But I didn't care. Something about that moment felt sacred, like the universe had paused just long enough for me to see him, not as a nuisance, not as a problem, but as a soul who had been waiting for someone to look twice. I knelt on the porch, the wood cold even through my jeans. I could see scratches on his paws, like he'd walked miles just to find this spot. A faint smell of wet earth and something sharp, maybe metal from digging through trash. My chest ached, imagining where he'd slept before this doorstep. Had he curled up under cars, in abandoned sheds? Had he waited by other doors that never opened? For weeks, I'd done nothing. Just walked past him, pretended not to notice. But that night, I couldn't unsee him. I whispered, "You don't have to keep sleeping out here forever." He blinked, slow, weary, but didn't move. So I sat beside him, letting the cold seep into my bones, just so he wouldn't be alone. The rain started soft, then harder, tapping on the roof above us. I couldn't leave him in the wet. Not again. I ran inside, grabbed an old quilt and a shallow bowl of water, and came back out. My hands shook as I held out the blanket. He sniffed it, but stayed still. I laid it near him and backed away. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, he shifted, curling on top of it like it was the first soft thing he'd known in years. I set down the water. He watched me, deciding. And then, for the first time, his tongue flicked out for a drink. Relief washed over me like the rain on the roof. He was alive. Thirsty, maybe hungry, but alive. I stayed with him until midnight, talking softly about nothing. About the stars peeking through the clouds. About how quiet the neighborhood was. About how my childhood dog Max used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms. I didn't know if he cared, but something told me he liked the sound of a human voice that meant no harm. When I finally went inside, I left the blanket and water with him. Through the window, I watched until he slept, curled a little looser now, breathing steadier. For the first time, he didn't look like he was bracing for the worst. But by morning, he was gone. The empty porch left a hollow feeling in my chest. Sadness, worry, guilt. All day at work, I replayed those tired eyes in my mind. Had he found shelter? Was he still hungry? That evening, I pulled into the driveway, heart pounding with hope and dread. The porch was empty. I sighed, defeated, until movement caught my eye. From under the big maple tree at the corner of my yard, he trotted toward me, hesitant, hopeful. His tail gave the tiniest wag, just once, before he slowed at the steps, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I crouched low. "Hey there, buddy, you came back." He sniffed my hand, then backed up a step. I went inside and brought out a plate of cooked chicken. He ate quickly, at first like he feared it would vanish. But as he finished, he looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw it, the first flicker of trust. That night, I sat with him again. When I stood to go inside, he whined, soft, longing. I sat back down, and for the first time, he rested his chin on my shoe. That tiny gesture felt like a promise. The next morning, I caught him halfway down the block, digging through a tipped-over trash can. My heart broke, watching him search for scraps. But when I called softly, "Hey, buddy," he froze, then trotted to me, tail wagging just a little more. I fed him, I talked to him, and when I reached out slowly, he let me touch his fur, coarse, tangled, but warm under my fingers. Over the next days, our routine deepened. He greeted me each morning with brighter eyes, a steadier wag. I bought him a real dog bed, a collar, a leash, toys. He sniffed the bed like it was a miracle, then curled up as if he'd been waiting his whole life for something this soft. One evening, I clipped the collar around his neck. He froze, but didn't pull away. "This is so people know you have someone looking out for you now," I whispered. He looked up at me, and I swear he understood. I started leaving the front door open a little wider each night. Some evenings, he stepped inside, sniffing the hallway, circling the living room rug, then retreating to the porch. But each time, he came a little farther. By the 5th week, he walked beside me on short, leashed walks around the block, tail high, eyes curious, like he was rediscovering joy in movement. One rainy night, I opened the door to let him in before the storm. This time, he followed me to the couch, and after a pause, climbed up beside me, curling against my side. It felt like a turning point. Not a guest anymore, not a stray who visited. He was home. By the 8th week, he slept inside every night, sometimes on his bed, sometimes at the foot of mine. He followed me from room to room, his head resting on my lap while I read, his body pressing close when thunder rolled. Neighbors who once looked at him with pity now smiled and waved. Some asked his name. I hadn't chosen one yet, but I was close. Each morning, he greeted me with happy barks, tail wagging like every sunrise was a gift. He played fetch in the park, chased sticks in the lake, napped in sunbeams like he'd been born to it. The dog who once trembled on my doorstep now ran through fields with his head high, ears flying back, tails streaming behind him like a banner of joy. And one evening, as we sat under a sky painted in sunset gold, I whispered the name I'd been testing in my heart, Buddy. His ears perked, his tail thumped. It was the right one. I clipped a new tag onto his collar that night, his name engraved in silver, shining under the stars. I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "You're safe now. You're home." And you're mine. He rested his head on my lap, eyes closing in perfect peace. The world outside had shifted, not because of grand gestures, but because of quiet ones. A blanket on a cold night, a bowl of water, a hand that stayed still long enough for trust to grow. Buddy didn't just find my doorstep. He found his forever. And in saving him, I think he saved me, too.